right.
unhappy for a while.
Well, she died in somewhat questionable circumstances,
Oh.
and that can make a big difference if you die very sudden and unexpected, and also with unresolved business. I mean, you know, you mentioned what kind of things might have helped clients with, in addition to all the typical love, money, and so forth. One of the very number one things that I will help clients with is making peace with those who've gone on. And when people have gone on, when they've lost a husband, when they've lost a child, a partner, or a relative, or just someone they need to make peace with, and they know it, or maybe they need to just know that they're still there.
And that's something that's a good thing. Another short segment here to take a break on, but you know, I'm sure that's one of the reasons they come to you, is they need that after some traumatic loss of some kind. So we want our listeners to stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. This is the Joan Jerkovich Show.
So your own mother had that. Wow. Would you care if I asked you a little bit about that, those the troubled spirits, or
if you want to go in that direction? I mean, I don't mind going that a little bit, but I do.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit is sort of tantalizing sometimes
I
for the
know.
listeners, but I really like to also concentrate on the positive, because
I agree.
There's so much fear. But then again, you never know. Somebody might be listening to the show who needs that little piece.
And then we can go ahead and, like we talked about, we can you know, wrap up with something positive and in the spiritual realm. So do we have 5 left, Paul, or what's our last one?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
It feels like the AC finally came on, or is that just a spirit in here?
I think it's the AC.
It seems like it's coming from the ground, too. I don't know.
Are you feeling things over there, Paul?
Oh,
Are you
no.
getting
Well, I was going to say, sometimes, I'm not saying this is the case, but it is one of the common manifestations when a spirit enters the room, that it would get very cold. Now, I'm hoping it's just the AC, but...
It's your mom.
It might be. I don't know.
She's
or
come
someone
to say
for you.
hi.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Or for you.
Yeah.
Well, I really don't,
hopefully.
thankfully, I don't really have any deceased relatives or anything like
Well,
that.
everybody has deceased relatives
yeah, I
somewhere
do,
back.
yeah.
How can you, if you don't have any deceased
Maybe I'll
relatives, I don't know
start to
how
see a
you're
white
here.
buffalo. Yeah, I mean, way back in my past, but nowhere that I've been super close to. Well, I do have grandparents.
You
but,
know, one of the things about spirits that is kind of interesting that I've learned in my work is that, you know, of course, over there's no time or space. Time and space is unique to our earthly illusion. So you can have a relative come back through who is someone you didn't know, who's been gone a long time. It doesn't really matter. They could have been gone 200 years, or, I mean, generally, you're not having people come back through who were 1,000 years old, and I believe, now this could be a topic for another time, I believe that's because they've reincarnated, so there is the cycle of reincarnation. But the feeling I get is spirits like to spend, of course there's no time there, but in our time zone, they like to spend a couple hundred years kicking back, you know, in between lives and resting and
building
relaxing.
up for coming back to this place that some people have called the living hell.
Well, that would be,
this is the place for our spiritual challenges, I think.
Well, I think that too. I mean, I'm of two minds. I think on one hand, I mean, I've often told my guides, yeah, you try being here.
Yeah.
You know, you try dealing with this. You know, being in this body sucks. You know, you got to eat, you got to have a job, and all of that stuff. But on the other hand, I really feel that it is a unique privilege to be here. My sense is that there are spirits lining up who want to come here for the opportunity to do it. I mean, in the same way that, you know, I just got back from Colorado not that long ago. I did a hike where I had to get down on my hands and knees and climb over rocks on a mountain for over a half a mile. I mean, why would I do that voluntarily?
Yeah, why did you do that?
But lots of people do it. Lots
Yeah,
of people
that's true.
seek that. They get on planes. I mean, we rode the train up to Pikes Peak. There were people on there, 4 or 5 of them, who at the top, they were part of a tour, they were going to ride bicycles down Pikes Peak, you guys. I guarantee you they came from a long ways to do that.
Me. No
So
kidding.
that's what the earth plane is like. It's like, you know, people lining up who, I believe many of us, maybe not all, some of us are probably here involuntarily. You know, or maybe reluctantly, let's say.
Okay.
But some of us are probably like, hey, we read the traveler brochure. This looks like a great place. Now, it might have lied. I don't know.
yeah. It was pretty glossy and pretty, but
yeah, you know
now
how
that I'm
travel
here,
brochures always are. I mean, you know.
The rooms always look bigger, you know,
Yeah,
the grass
right.
always looks greener.
The quaint cabin is a hole in the wall when you get there, you know. But,
no trickle of a shower.
Right.
Exactly. Well, so interesting. Oh, there's so much to think about and talk about. But let's give it a go for the last 5 minutes.
Okay.
Right, Paul?
Sure.
Welcome back. This is Joan with the Joan Jerkovich Show, 910 KINA Salina. And I want you to make sure that you go to joanjerkovich.com to watch the video outtakes. Cynthia really had a lot to say during the break that you're going to want to listen to. Some very animated conversation that's interesting, exciting, and I'm learning a lot. Now, something I did mention to Cynthia that we're going to touch on just briefly, but she does work sometimes with spirits that are a little bit disturbed. What do you do with those? What do you see with those? It
depends on the spirit, obviously. But what I try to do is, number one, help make sure that they know that they are quote-unquote dead.
Is this where hauntings come in, or is that something different?
It can overlap. And I will say the majority of my work is done with individuals and families, and in the reading spectrum, you might say. I don't prefer to go out to haunted houses and clean them out. I have done that work. It's very dangerous for psychics.
In what way?
Well, in what way? If you've seen some of these hauntings, I mean, sometimes there is physical manifestations. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, you know, they're knocking things off the walls, or there's even weird fires or water damage. And the spirit can follow the psychic back to their own house.
That's interesting because I have a guest I was just talking to. We're working to get her on for next week's show. She has a haunting in an antique shop that she had, and when she sat on the reclining couch, the spirit didn't like it and literally scratched her. And there's video of that by the paranormal investigators who were there when it happened.
Yes, and
so you can be physically attacked.
You can be, and you can be spiritually and emotionally attacked. I have to be careful about that, even in the one-on-one sessions that I do. If I bring through, say, somebody's deceased husband who was a real, you know, SOB in life, he was really harsh and had a negative energy. You know, I have to make sure that I detach, and I also have to have strong psychic shields. And that takes us around really to the beginning of our conversation about, you know, psychics having weight problems. Another reason for the eating and the weight is protection. So psychics will put that on to have a boundary between them and the spirits. There are other ways to protect, and that's a lot of what I teach in my classes, helping people with that. Because, you know, there are many people out there, probably many people listening and watching this, who are very sensitive. They are very psychically sensitive. And you can be injured by that if you do not know how to protect yourself, how to thicken your shell, literally.
So tell us how you do that, because in one of the books I read by Sylvia Brown, she talked about covering yourself with the white light, or even imagining mirrors so that those negative energies stay away from you.
Those are all good ways, and especially the white light. And you know, what's really helpful to a lot of people in our society, since we do live in the region of the country where many people are Christian, is to say a prayer. Well, no matter what your religion is, you can say a prayer, but especially something like the Lord's Prayer or the Rosary, because there's so much energy around that, so much protective energy. And
is that based on the masses of people that might be saying those prayers with you?
Partially, yes. There's an energy that is built up. And also, I mean, if you go back to those prayers in their original languages, which of course we don't say them in the original language, but they are a echo of the original. In the original language, the very sounds of the words themselves had power to invoke protection. So we are calling upon that, creating a psychic shield with that. And there are protective prayers in many, many religions. Those particular ones are of the Christian and then also the Catholic religion. They work well. And other prayers can work well too. In the Unity Faith, they have the Prayer of Protection by James Dillman. So that's another good one.
Well, I think that's something we're going to have to end on, but it's a wonderful thing to end on. You know, if we have that sense of negativity or something, you know, go back to prayer.
Right. Ask God for help.
Ask God to help protect you. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are listening today that want to know more about Cynthia, so I'm going to direct you to her website, which is www.cynthia, C-Y-N-T-H-I-A, Killian, K-I-L-L-I-O-N.com. And for sure, you're going to want to go, again, to my website, joanjerkovich.com, and you can figure that one out how to spell for yourself. But joanjerkovich.com and watch the video outtakes, because I'm probably not going to let her out of the studio just yet. We're going to talk some more. This is the Joan Jerkovich Show, 9 a.m. Saturdays on 910 KINA Salina.
I have to ask you off air, but it'll be on the video. What's going on when I have dreams that the very next day are like, oh my gosh, two in particular. I dreamt about an old high school classmate, and I'm like, why am I dreaming about this guy?
Right.
You know? And I saw him in Sam's.
Wow,
the
that's
next
pretty cool.
day, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I hadn't seen him in 10 years, hadn't thought of him in 10 years.
You must be pretty tapped in then.
It was interesting. And then another one, I dreamt that this woman who always had very long, you know, full hair had cut her hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, why did I dream that? That was kind of weird. Very next day, I walk into a social gathering, and she had cut her hair, and I'm just like, you cut your hair? And it really freaked her out when I told her how that happened. So what is that? Or
well, I don't know that I have a concrete explanation for it, but I know that, you know, people have psychic dreams all the time.
Yeah.
And not all dreams are psychic,
right.
obviously.
No, I always don't want those bad ones to be psychic. You know,
right,
I kind of
right,
go,
right.
I don't believe in that because I don't want that to happen.
And a lot of times they aren't. A lot of
Yeah,
times the bad ones aren't, because
right.
you know, from my studies with dreams, what I see that the research indicates is that we do work through our fears and our subconscious.
Yes.
And so
I would agree with that.
a lot of fear-based dreams are not true. Now that's not always the case, and you kind of have to look at the context. I mean, if you're dreaming about something that doesn't seem to have much of a conscious connection to your life at all, that is a sign that that dream could be a psychic dream, actually. Because
That is
it
interesting.
comes out very
Yeah.
surprisingly.
It was like, that is interesting. So that's an interesting differentiation in between
That's
the
one of the
dreams
ways
that
I
you're
would
kind
say.
of, okay, I watched that TV show or I talked to that person today, so of course
Right,
I had
and I will
dream.
say the research does show that what you do before you go to sleep does affect your dreams, even to the point of they have found that if they have certain smells underneath people's noses while they're dreaming, they will dream of that food. So the body does respond. There are messages from the body going in, and that is different than psychic phenomenon. But you can learn by working with your dreams what your psychic dreams are like. And it sounds like for you that they kind of come from left field, and that's a good sign.
Meaning
Well, just
that they're
not
truly
connected.
psychic and they're not like an anxiety dream.
Right.
Now, what happened when I was talking with when my husband and I were dating, and my husband happens to be a psychiatrist.
Right.
Not that that has anything to do with anything, except when you said anxiety dreams, has said many times a lot of people have a lot of anxiety dreams.
Yes, because they're processing that fear because they don't want to deal with it in conscious life.
But I was talking with him, and his father's been deceased for a while, and this was actually when we were dating, and I was at his house, and he had some important thing he needed to go to the next day, and I just said a little prayer to his father, you know, that I can't be there with him, you know, someone else can. We can't be there with him to support him with this. Can you be there with him? And I never met his father. And I'm sitting looking straight ahead. We're sitting on the couch, and I'm looking straight ahead, and I literally saw a face off my left shoulder, which turned to my head. I mean, it's like I saw it. And he just looked at me, and we both just had this interior smile, and it was like, nice to meet you. You know?
Awesome.
And I just had this sense that, oh my goodness, what really happened? It felt so real. It didn't feel spooky or anything. It just felt like in some way I was communicating with his dad, and he was sitting here saying, I approve of you.
Yes.
I approve of you for my son. And it was just amazing. And I thought, we hadn't even been dating that long. I thought, oh my goodness, I can't tell this guy this. He'll like dump me in a second. I mean, it's like, you know, a scientific guy, a real scientific minds are oftentimes pretty doubting. You know, they believe in science and not all this mysticism.
Science is a religion.
To them, yes. And that's why some of them struggle with religion. I even had a pastor in here on one of my shows, and we talked about that, where scientific, very intellectual people oftentimes have a lot of trouble with things. But I told him, and so he challenged me, and he says, well, tell me something, have him tell you something that only he or my mom or something like that would know. Well, that's never come to me, and of course that was a reasonable response from him, but at least he didn't break up with me.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
we just celebrated our 7-year anniversary Saturday, but was that real? I mean, it felt so real.
What do you feel?
It felt real. And it
It
felt,
certainly could be real. I feel that it is real.